All right, 5-minute lessons, properties of exponential functions, really focusing on graphing, the domain, the range, and the asymptote, okay? You've heard domain and range, but now it's going to start getting a little bit more tricky. So I'm just going to do numbers 1 and 2 to help you guys with this. Before we get started, I want to remind you something that's come up a little bit lately, and that is any number to the 0 power is equal to 1, okay? So how do we find our y-intercept? We put in a 0 for x. 1/5 to the 0 power is actually 1. But here, the y-intercept is actually 2 because 3 to the 0 is 1. Then we got to add 1. So this is still just representing a vertical shift, but that changes our y-intercept as well. It's also going to have an effect on our asymptote and our range. So let's explore these in the graphing calculator. Let's start with number 1, y equals 1/5 to the x power. Keep in mind that's 1 times 1/5 to the x power. Y equals alpha, y equals, enter, 1/5 to the x power. We'll graph it. Let's go back to my standard window, but finding a good window is going to be important. That's what we expected. Look, our y-intercept is 0, 1. It is decaying fast, and this might be kind of a hard graph to put. I want you to notice that our graphing calculator is just giving us our answers in scientific notation because they're getting so big and so small so fast. So I think we're going to graph -1, 5, 0, 1, and 1, 1/5. If you take close notice, we're multiplying by 1/5 each time to get from one number to the next number. Okay, so we can handle -1, 5 for sure. And then we can handle 0, 1. And then we can handle 1, 1/5. So that's probably enough to give us a good sketch. Now, how do I graph that? It's getting closer and closer and closer to this line, but it's never going to touch it. That's what an asymptote is. Okay. Another thing is there any number that I'm not allowed to put in for x there? We are unlimited. So the domain, we could just write infinity. We could write all real numbers. We could write this thing here, which means all reals. We could say x goes from -infinity to +infinity. All those would be good ways to write the range. Now we do, or sorry, the domain. Now we do have a limit on our range. If you notice, y is always going to be greater than 0, not greater than or equal to 0, greater than 0, because there's nothing we can put in that will make this actually go to 0. And I don't know, like a good way to think about that is just to explore through your graphing calculator. Come on now, come on. So keep scrolling down and you'll see that number on the right just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but it's not turning into 0. The problem is it will show you 0. You need to understand what's going on. It's like I'm stepping closer and closer to the wall, but I'm getting halfway there each time. Well, I'll never actually get to the wall. Okay. All right, let's look at number 2 now. So now we have y equals 3 to the x plus 1. 3 to the x over plus 1. Let's give it a look. Okay, notice we predicted the y-intercept will be 2. We were correct. Okay, if I look at my table. So if you ever get stuck on this, go to table settings and just start the table at 0. And then go back to the table. And now we got there, okay? So if I keep going back into negative time, now here's again, this is misleading. we don't actually ever get to 1. We get closer and closer and closer to 1 without ever getting there. And I don't know if it, like, watch, if I scroll over, what does this say? Notice, see what it says? It's estimating that it's 1. It's not 1. It's above 1. Same with that one. It's above 1. It's above 1. It's above 1. They're all above 1. They're getting closer and closer to 1. So let's look at my graph again. All right, so now I think I could go back to this. My domain is going to be all real numbers. My range is that y has to be bigger than 1. So, I get it now. Look, there was a 0 here, and my range was y is bigger than 0. So my asymptote, this would be the line x equals 0. That's my asymptote. And this would be the line x equals 1. That's my asymptote. So this number here corresponds to the asymptote, which has an effect on the range. Okay, see if that helps. I know you're going to have questions on some of the other ones. Let's add to this list by asking me for help, and I'll add the questions as needed.